Okay, hello and welcome everybody. Thank you for joining today's Tips and Tricks webinar. Today's topic, as you can see, is on best practices workshops. Presenting today is one of our regional architects, AJ Della Posta. AJ's in North Carolina. Almost said new something. And he works for our SLED team, right, AJ? So that's with
Correct.
state,
Yep.
local
Vertical
government
solution.
and education. So I don't know how many of you are on that side of the fence, but obviously we have those on the commercial side too. So AJ, what do you have for us today?
Yeah. No, thanks for the intro. So we're going to be talking a bit about best practices workshops, what they are, what they entail, the value of them, and some of the use cases that we've seen from doing quite a few of these. To give a brief intro of myself, I'm AJ Della Posta. I'm an architect for Vertical Solutions, sort of the other side of the house from a Checkpoint business perspective. Primarily, I handle state, local governments, education. I came from the commercial side originally, having dabbled with strategic accounts, large commercial accounts, territory development. So I have the privilege to see quite a bit from a lot of different customers, and a lot of those lessons learned throughout the years and from different organizations were the driving force to building these workshops and to building these reports. I'll dive right into it and basically discuss the workshop offerings overall. So workshops come in two different flavors. We offer a security workshop and a best practices workshop. Primarily, we're going to be focused on the right side here, the best practices workshop. The security workshop is meant to be a much more holistic, high-level view of your security posture, so that it extends beyond just the checkpoint offerings or even just the checkpoint deployment. It's going to cover a really wide swath of different technologies. Where the best practices workshop is a bit more focused. We're going to be really zeroing in on the checkpoint deployment as a whole, making sure that each part of the checkpoint environment, each part of the ecosystem is behaving, is giving us the value that we expect from it, and is accomplishing that security goal. Let's dive right into the best practices workshop. So what we'll cover is what is a best practices workshop? Again, we're going to be focusing specifically on the checkpoint environment as a whole. We want to look at how the checkpoint is being operated and implemented. What is the workflow of the day-to-day administration? What are the challenges that the security team is facing? Are all the products and features meeting the goals and meeting the needs of the environment? And if there is a gap, let's find out where that gap is. So as you can see here, it's really meant to prioritize and strategize those kind of macro security practices from a checkpoint perspective, and to kind of put lines on the field of what it is not. So it is not meant to troubleshoot existing service requests. If there are outstanding requests that need escalation, additional context, I'm happy to assist in that way as well. I can be a touch point for escalation. But ultimately, TAC is going to be our go-to for break fix. These are not professional service engagements. Both workshop offerings are zero cost to the customer. There's not a statement of work. There's no credits that are needed to be turned in. These are free offerings that we can basically sit down and strategize and look at things, from a very unbiased perspective and figure out where the improvements need to happen. It is not meant to focus on a specific product configuration, but oftentimes, having done a best practices workshop, we discover, maybe we should sit down and have a deep dive on, say, Maestro or SmartEvent or one of the other products that we have. So we really have that technical, granular understanding of how everything works. And finally, it's not meant to be a sales pitch. In no way am I incentivized in having a customer buy millions of dollars of equipment that doesn't serve the goal that was initially put forth. We want to make sure that you're rendering the value of what you paid for from a Checkpoint perspective, making sure you're getting the most out of the gear that was purchased and implemented. So what's covered in a best practices workshop? So we cover items both non-technical and technical in nature from that operational perspective. We'll touch on items, support, training, environmental controls, kind of non-technical, almost business driver type elements. Is the team at a certification level where they feel comfortable implementing, changing, doing upgrades? And then we'll slowly transition into more technical topics. Policy and rule base. What kind of business continuity plans do we have in place? Is there any virtualization happening? Hardware configurations is always a big one. Endpoint and cloud best practices are touched on as well. I will point out policy and rule base is often a really big topic for a lot of customers. At least the government customers that I talk to, policies, it's very easy for a policy to get pretty out of control. You're adding rules, you're taking on projects, you have contractors come in, maybe you're inheriting your policy from a previous administrator. Spending time to optimize your rule base, optimize those unused objects goes a long way in just making everything just flow and operate much more smoothly. We'll also leverage discovery tools. So any discovery tool we use in our investigation and research, you'll get a copy of. And those tools can be anything from pro support, making we have visibility to the gateways from a proactive perspective. Gateway sizing, if we have a gateway that may be undersized or maybe choking at certain times of the day due to policy volume or just traffic volume, let's find out why and see if we can tune some more performance out of it. Policy analysis I mentioned before, and then just general discussion and whiteboarding. We want to hear from you what the challenges are, where the pain points are, and how we can help resolve those. It's the value, the takeaways from it. You're hopefully going to get a much deeper understanding of your Checkpoint environment. You can improve just that overall efficiency, the day-to-day usage of it. You'll align with Checkpoint best practices. So you can say, Checkpoint reviewed my environment and didn't see any red flags or blatant gaps in the wall, and we're good to go. You'll have an improved incident readiness. That has come up a few times with customers because it's not even a matter of if I'll have an incident, it's when I'll have an incident. And after you do a workshop or a best practices workshop, because you have a deeper understanding, you're much more able to react. You're much more able to handle those incidents that are inevitably coming your way. And I'm going to hopefully connect you guys to the proper tools and resources. So if we have to do a deep dive on a very specific product, if we need to have really in-depth conversations with R&D or a product specialist, we can absolutely make that happen and build those relationships and touch points. Excuse me. And finally, it's not meant to point fingers. The last thing we want to do is have it be an examination exercise where the existing security team is meant to look bad. That is not the goal here. We just want to understand what areas of the environment, what aspects just need more attention, need improvement. Leverage a best practices workshop to help justify, maybe an additional spend from your, the powers that be. Maybe we need to think about more, education. Let's find out how we can improve things from a holistic perspective, as well as a technical perspective. So we're going to do a few examples of what we can reveal here. So performance tuning. And this is a screenshot from a pro report, by the way, so if this looks familiar for some folks out there. Dynamic balancing is not turned on. This is one of those features that by default should be turned on, and it makes a big difference as far as performance and just overall traffic, traffic handling. If there was a particular reason dynamic balancing was turned off, let's find out why. It's no certain rules, certain diagnostic scripts can sometimes break dynamic balancing. Maybe it was turned off to do some debugging and then somebody just forgot to turn it back on. But it's a good thing that we caught it in this report. And it's, in this case, it was a pretty straightforward fix to just turn it back on. And oh, all of a sudden our utilization drops, 20% for that gateway. Detecting smoke before the fire. Oftentimes we'll start to see problems or potential problems before they become larger ones or worst case scenario, even outages. So in this case, we had an interface that was, basically just being overrun, a core XL being overrun, and the queue just wasn't able to handle this deluge of traffic, and we were dropping packets. 15,000 packet drops, depending on the size of the environment, can be a whole lot or very little. And in this case, the customer was unaware that this was even happening. And as we watched over the next few days, that 15,000 figure slowly started to climb. And as soon as we increased the queue size, we got that packet drop issue under control, and no outages or affected tickets were ever opened for that particular one. So when you conduct a workshop, whether it be a security workshop or a best practices workshop, process flow is very straightforward. We do an introduction call, not very dissimilar to the conversation we're having right here. I'll distribute the documents, the blank documents, and basically the stencil that we're going to follow along the way for reference. We'll examine the areas that we want to focus on. If there's a particular section that we really want to, deep dive on or add a little bit more content to, we can certainly do that. And then we'll go into an interview session. And that interview will basically be running through the questions that I'll show in a minute, building out the report, and then doing some data collection and research. And that's going to come from the tools that I showed earlier. After we take the output of our tools, our interview information, we'll then take that back and digest all of that and then produce a delivery document and an action plan. And that document will prioritize the findings that we found, the gaps that we might be concerned about, and then we can have a conversation on how we want to attack this. How do we want to prioritize this? Is this something that we can easily handle ourselves? That the customer can do themselves, that the Checkpoint sales team can assist? Or do we have to have a conversation with a trusted partner or professional services? Maybe some larger upgrades and implementation work needs to be done. And that's really what we want to structure out and figure out. The reviews themselves can take anywhere from a few hours to a full day, depending on the complexity of the environment and how granular we need to go. We have done best practice workshops for customers as small as, I believe it was a municipality in rural Kentucky. He had 7 users, and he was the admin for 7 users. He wanted to do it, and I think they got a lot of value from it. All the way up to major telcos and telcos that I'm sure you're using right now, national level. We need to have an understanding of the business functionality as well as operations. So I mentioned that earlier. We're not just looking at configurations and buttons and switches within the gateways. We want to understand as a whole, where does Checkpoint sit in the environment? What are the driving factors that influence how the Checkpoint is implemented? And again, if there's any specific areas of interest, we certainly want to cover those. At the end, you'll see a completed review document. I'll show a sample here in a few minutes. the output of any tools that we used. So whether that's, gateway sizing or pro report, you'll all get copies of that. And then after we complete our engagement, we'll have touch points along the way to make sure that we're following the path and keeping up with our changes, making sure, that doesn't kind of slip through the cracks and get lost, and keep things moving in the right direction. All right. Let me switch to a quick sample report, and then we'll open it up to questions. So to visualize what it looks like. So basically, you're going to get a best practices review document. These are the chapters that we're going to cover. And each chapter has a series of questions that we give a rating to. Ratings, very basic. Either it doesn't apply, doesn't exist, it exists but is not ideal, or it's perfect and we wouldn't change a thing. And then based on the discussion we have, the research we do with our tools, we can build a rating for each item. There will also be reference information for each item. So if we're discussing something like an RMA, for example, making sure we have a good RMA hygiene, having documentation ready, having locally stored copies of code, being familiar with isomorphic utilities. And if we ever need to understand what the official RMA process is, the link is attached right in the report. Same goes for other items such as life cycle, certification paths, et cetera, et cetera. So as you move through the document, it's a good snapshot in time, but also a good reference material to go back to and say, oh yeah, we discussed SNMP monitoring. Where's that SK to configure SNMP? Right there in the doc. Each section is then boiled down into a radar graph to give us an output. Just a handy visualization on what's going very well and what needs a little help. So in this scenario, hardware was excellent. No configuration modifications needed. Everything was turned on, running really smoothly. Consolidation and virtualization was also very good. But we need to spend a little time on the policy and rule base. It was a few years old. It had seen a lot of different administrators. It had a lot of unused objects. Cleanup is fairly straightforward, but we just have to make time to get it done. Training was a gap for this customer. They had, again, inherited it from a previous administrator. They weren't all that familiar with Checkpoint before coming on. So let's make sure that you have a clear path to training. You have the training resources available. And basically just spelling those out. So another recommendation here was endpoint management resiliency. So this customer wasn't able to leverage cloud-based management, or it was something that they were at least considering or not sure about. So all right, if we can't do cloud-based endpoint management, let's at least have some kind of redundancy, whether virtualized or an appliance or whatever it is. Training I mentioned earlier, pointing you guys in the right direction of whether it's starting up a CCSA, or there's all types of low cost or no cost training resources out there. And policy review and optimization I mentioned earlier, and why that's important. We take up those recommendations and items and then essentially have a discussion on how we want to prioritize that. And that is our go forward plan. So in this case, we wanted to bring the migration to SmartOne Cloud, at least for gateway management, right to the top. That was something they were very interested in. Review the policy and rule base via Smart Optimize was their next step. Enrollment and training and certifications. And then making sure we keep up with endpoint client version updates was the final item. And as I mentioned earlier, once we have these down on paper, we can really decide, okay, this is something we're able to handle as a local team. This is not a big deal. Or if this is just going to be way too labor intensive, too big to take on, let's talk to our partner. Let's talk to professional services, and bring our radar graph all the way out to 3 out of 3 across the board. So yeah, essentially that is how a best practices workshop runs. Obviously, each review and workshop is a little bit different. But yeah, opening our time up here to any questions that might be out there.
Yep, we have some questions for you, AJ.
Sure.
First off, what's the customer's investment in this as far
Sure.
as time and prerequisites for this best practice workshop?
So the time investment, we're very flexible in that way. So the reviews themselves can take anywhere from a few hours to, I mean, half a day is really, that's a big one for us. The strategic telco customers that we've done this with, those take multiple days just because they're so complex. But I would say on average, for an organization, maybe a couple dozen gateways, even multi-domain environments, half a day to a few hours, I would say.
Could you break it up? There's one I just thought of.
Oh yeah.
Can you break it up for different technologies? Say you're only dealing with the cloud teams, just do a cloud best practice.
Absolutely, and we've done that before. So I've done workshops in basically three parts. So session one is the non-business stuff. Session two is the policy and gateway side, and then the last section is just the cloud and mobile folks. So yeah, we can splice it up however works for everyone's schedule.
Okay. And I'm sorry if I didn't hear your answer here, but I know you said the time that the customer, but what about prerequisites before you get there? Is there anything that customers should do before you kick off this best practice?
No, I mean, not necessarily. For a security workshop, yes, there are some prerequisites involved. So for a security workshop, we're going to need some additional sensors in place, some additional data gathering. As far as saying, I want to start a best practices workshop, there's no prerequisites unless you can tell us, day one, we know this gateway is undersized. Let's launch the sizing utility and find out how undersized it is. That's not something that necessarily has to be done ahead of time, but that's something we'll want to look at, going into the workshop.
Gotcha. This one, maybe it'll make more sense to you, but does this also apply to partners who have multiple customers?
Absolutely, yeah. So this can be done for any number of checkpoint customers or use cases. I mean, we have customers that are doing these on a recurring basis. So we have a number of municipalities, actually, state governments, that have run one of these, got a lot of value from it, really, got a real clear direction on where and how they want to move things forward. And they said, great, come back to us in 6 months, come back to us in a year, run it again. And we hopefully will see an improvement over time.
Yep, absolutely. I think that covers it for questions. So thank you, AJ. Great information. Well, like you said here, these are very valuable, no cost to you except for some time investment, but no matter the size of your environment, this can make your checkpoint environment more stable. Direction, what tools are out there to help you be more stable. So, no matter what size you are, I highly encourage you talking to your account team and get one of these scheduled. And like AJ said, year over year, do another check-in down the road and make sure you're still on the right path. Somebody just asked if we had one before, can we do it again? Absolutely.
Oh, of course. If
Like we
anything,
just
it's
said.
encouraged.
Yeah, encouraged to do it again. Yes. Abuse your team to get another one scheduled just to check in and see where you are and make sure you're moving in the right direction. And obviously, as your environment grows or you get new equipment or new products, there's other things that we can include in this too. So absolutely, whatever works for you.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Rob. Actually, the use cases we've seen time and time again, ahead of a renewal, maybe ahead of an Infinity contract, or even just a level set, litmus test of, how secure is my environment? Just any of those use cases, we see a lot of value there.
Absolutely. I've got some more questions here for you.
Yeah.
One is, can I have access to that document? Do you
Absolutely.
mean your doc? I was just going to clarify. Do you mean your document after the workshop, or do you mean the sample one that AJ is showing? If you can just throw that answer in the
in
Q&A.
both scenarios, the answer is yes.
Okay.
You can have the sample doc, and then at the end of the engagement, you get a copy of the completed report. Yeah.
Okay, great. Another one here. How many gateways and managers will be handled with this best practice workshop?
As many as we need to. So for the large telco, we were dealing with thousands of gateways, and then for the small municipality, it was just the one.
Yeah, I mean, any size customer, no matter what, I mean, obviously it would be great to capture the entire checkpoint footprint. So we
Sure.
get a good handle on everything, but like we said, we can break it up in sections too, if that's what you prefer.
For big customers that have hundreds and hundreds, if we don't want to look at every single one, a lot of times we'll take a sample size. So if it's a multi-domain, we'll take one of those domains and kind of focus on that to make sure we don't get too much sprawl.
I think that covers it. Please, you have any questions, type them in quickly. I'll go through our end here. Thank you again, AJ. Great information.
Yep.
We'll send that follow-up email with any reference content and recording link of this session. Our next webinar will be in 2 weeks. You'll see the invitation for that soon. With that, we'll let you go. Thanks again for joining us. We'll see you here next time. Thank you, AJ, and everyone else. Enjoy your day. Talk
Thanks
to you
for the time,
later.
guys.
Bye all.
Thank you.